On the morning of October 5, 2012, the weather in Westminster, Colorado was a mix of snow and clouds. This was the day that 10-year-old Jessica Ridgway, who lived with her mother Sarah Ridgway, her aunt and her grandmother, went missing. Jessica was a 5th grade student at Witt Elementary, but on that particular morning, she was running late and missed walking to school with her friends. Instead, she decided to take a short walk to school on her own, but she never arrived. The question remained, what happened to Jessica? Did she get lost in the snow, or was there a more disturbing reason behind her disappearance? Westminster, located in both Adams and Jefferson counties, is a city in Colorado. As of 2020, it had a population of approximately 116,000, making it the 8th largest city in the state. The city is home to prominent companies such as the Western Fuels Association, Ball, and Digital Globe. Westminster also boasts dedicated land areas for recreational activities, including Stanley Lake Regional Park, Westminster Hills, and numerous neighborhood parks, community parks, and golf courses. In terms of crime, Westminster is considered a relatively safe community, with a crime rate of 3.96 per thousand residents for violent crimes and 45 for property crimes. This is the city where Jessica Ridgway lived. Born on January 23, 2002, in Westminster, Colorado. Jessica was the daughter of Sarah Ridgway and Jeremiah Bryant. Due to her parents' separation, she found herself caught in a custody battle that involved both Colorado and Missouri. Despite these challenges, Jessica remained grounded in her routines and her Colorado home, where she lived with her mother, grandmother, and aunt. Her favorite color was purple, and her distinctive purple-rimmed glasses symbolize her love for the color. As Jessica grew older, she displayed an unexpected level of responsibility, taking care of her dog and fulfilling her chores without reminders. She had a deep bond with her dog, even capturing their moments together in home videos as she attempted to teach her tricks. Her independence and maturity often made her seem older than her actual age of 10 years old. Jessica demonstrated exceptional academic abilities and had a particular passion for mathematics, which her teachers recognized. In addition to her academic achievements, she actively participated in the Pee Wee cheerleading squad. The squad occasionally practiced at Stanley High School, which was conveniently located nearby. Jessica possessed a natural talent for brightening the lives of those around her, often seen with her infectious smile that revealed a charming little gap between her front teeth. However, fate had different plans for her. On October 5, 2012, Jessica's day began like any other. She followed her usual morning routine, enjoying a granola bar and some TV time despite the snowy weather. Earlier that morning, she had arranged to walk to school with her friend, so she called her friend's dad. Jessica's mother Sarah had just finished her night shift and returned home at 7:30 a.m. to assist her daughter in getting ready for school. Due to the snowy conditions, Jessica dressed in blue jeans, a black jacket with pink lining, and black boots adorned with small fluffy palms. She also wore her distinctive purple prescription eyeglasses and carried a black and pink backpack featuring a character from the popular show Victorious on Disney Channel. Jessica headed towards Chelsea Park to meet her friends for their usual walk to school. Unfortunately, she arrived late, and her friend's father had already driven her friend to school because they were running behind schedule, waiting for Jessica. Despite being familiar with the route and feeling secure in her neighborhood, Jessica decided to walk to school alone. Little did she know what awaited her. When roll call was taken at school that day, Jessica Ridgway was noticeably absent. Concerned, her 5th grade teacher contacted Jessica's mother, Sarah Ridgway, to inform her of the situation. Unfortunately, Sarah missed the call as she was still asleep after her late night shift. It wasn't until Sarah woke up at 4:00 p.m. that she realized Jessica had not returned home. After checking her voicemails, she was concerned to discover a call from the police at 10:00 a.m., informing her that Jessica hadn't made it to school. It seemed that Jessica's teacher had contacted the police after being unable to reach Jessica's mother. Sarah sensed that something was amiss as Jessica never skipped school. Alarmed, Sarah immediately called the police back to report Jessica as missing. Restless and worried, she hurried to a neighbor's house to inquire if they had seen Jessica. Subsequently, She went to the school in search of her daughter. The sinking feeling in Sarah's gut grew stronger as she feared that Jessica might be in danger, but she could determine whether it was an accident or something more sinister. She tirelessly searched the area that night, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. The following day, October 6th, a massive search operation was launched involving teams of police officers, concerned family members, and community volunteers. They meticulously combed through every inch of Jessica's usual fifth-of-a-mile route to school, leaving no stone unturned. Search dogs and thermal sensors were deployed to cover the surrounding areas of her neighborhood and the paths she typically took. Regrettably, the search yielded no results, leading to the issuance of an Amber Alert featuring Jessica's photo and description. Descriptive missing posters were circulated, outlining Jessica's features. In an effort to engage the public in the search, both the police and the community adorned the school and Jessica's route with purple ribbons. Jessica's disappearance sent shockwaves through the small and modest community, which was home to 13,000 residents. The incident prompted parents to become more vigilant, closely monitoring their children's whereabouts and actively seeking potential suspects within their community. 2 days later, on October 7th, Jessica's backpack was discovered in Superior, 6 miles away from her home. The bag contained various items belonging to Jessica, including her glasses, boots, clothes soaked in urine, and a water bottle labeled "Life is Good." The individual who found the backpack noticed Jessica Ridgway's name on the bottle and decided to post about the missing bag online, hoping to reunite the items with their owner. However, they were unaware that Jessica was missing and the connection to the ongoing Amber Alert. Fortunately, someone online made the connection and promptly alerted the police. The police swiftly took action, recovering the bag and conducting DNA and fingerprint tests. The DNA from the backpack matched that of a suspect involved in a previous assault and abduction attempt. Although this suspect was not in the police database, leading to an ongoing search, the police collected numerous DNA samples from various communities for cross-checking, a meticulous and time-consuming process. While the discovery of the backpack hinted that Jessica might still be with her kidnapper, it raised concerns as she required her glasses for vision. The search efforts shifted towards Superior, where her backpack was found, in the hopes of obtaining a lead on Jessica's whereabouts. On October 10th, officers focused their attention on Marvada, which was approximately 9 miles from Jessica's home. It was there that partial human remains were discovered in an abandoned mine shack in Patriot Park. By a member of the search party, the area was thoroughly examined by the police in search of additional evidence. The scene was truly horrifying, as officers came across a child-sized torso without limbs or a head. DNA testing confirmed the identity of the remains as Jessica's, devastating her family. The medical examiner noted disturbing details, such as the body being cleaned, organs removed, and a foreign object found inside. Near the crime scene, detectives also discover a small wooden cross necklace. The search for Jessica Ridgway now transitioned from a rescue mission to a murder investigation. During this time, suspicions lingered around Jessica's mother Sarah, as she was the last person to have seen Jessica alive. Even Jessica's father, Brian, expressed his concerns when questioned about Sarah's potential involvement. In response to these suspicions, Sarah released a public statement that lasted for 38 minutes. During this statement, she emphasized her complete cooperation with the police investigation and aimed to dispel any doubts regarding her involvement in Jessica's disappearance. With no clear leads and after ruling out Jessica's immediate family as suspects, the authorities found themselves grappling with the fear that the child killer resided within their close-knit community, nearly 2 weeks after Jessica's disappearance. A breakthrough occurred when a woman contacted the police tip line. She recognized the cross necklace from media coverage of the murder and stated that it closely resembled one owned by her neighbor. 17-year-old Austin Reed Sig was born on January 17, 1995, in Westminster, Colorado. His parents, Mindy and Robert, separated when Austin was just a few years old. Following the separation, Austin lived with his mother, while his father, Robert, resided in a nearby mansion after remarrying. During his upbringing, Austin faced academic struggles, particularly in reading and writing. Teachers noticed his difficulty concentrating in school, which prompted suggestions for an evaluation to determine if he had a potential learning disability. Pediatricians also suggested that he may have attention deficit disorder. Austin attended Maranatha Christian Center and Witt Elementary School during his early education. Despite his academic challenges, he maintained a social life described by classmates as both intelligent and slightly peculiar. Austin participated in the Jeffco concert choir and had interests in World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, as well as a small collection of decorative swords and knives. However, what truly set him apart was his open fascination with death, which made him appear peculiar and intriguing to some. In 2008, Austin's mother Mindy discovered child pornography on his computer, marking the beginning of a troubled relationship with graphic and violent content. As a result, Austin was taken to a faith-based center for counseling from 2008 to 2009. Unfortunately, this intervention did not lead to any significant improvement. After the initial counseling, his problems actually worsened over time. Surprisingly, he never sought help again. The counselors had advised his father to monitor what Austin was watching on TV and doing on the computer, but unfortunately, there was little follow-through in actually tracking the content he consumed. Austin's father, Robert, had a troubling history of criminal activities, including burglary, fraud, domestic violence, and driving under the influence. However, there were no known charges related to child abuse. Nevertheless, there were restraining orders against him from his ex-wife due to his problematic relationships. Despite the early conflicts between his parents, the rest of Austin's home life appeared to be calm and nurturing. He shared a room with his younger brother, and his side of the space was adorned with Japanese decorations, katanas, a kimono, and an Abbey Road Beatles poster. Despite his diverse interests, Austin seemed to maintain a normal social life, even having a girlfriend whom he met at a Christian teen gathering called the Warehouse 180. Their relationship lasted from middle school through high school without any concerning signs. According to his mother, he spent an average of 3 nights a week at home. However, where he stayed on the other nights remained a mystery. Austin's interest expanded to crime scene forensics and mortuary science. His fascination with death became a significant driving force and earned him recognition in a high school forensics competition. Austin displayed exceptional talent in crime scene investigations. Securing his second-place award, he pursued his passion at Warrant Tech, where he received accolades for his crime scene investigation skills. Astonishingly, his dedication to morbid subjects extended to Arapahoe Community College, where he took classes that allegedly taught him how to commit murder and evade capture. In May 2012, at the age of 17, Austin made his first attempt at a serious crime. He tried to incapacitate a 22-year-old female jogger at a park in Westminster near Kettner Lake using homemade chloroform. Fortunately, she fought back and successfully escaped his attack. The jogger promptly reported the incident to the police, providing a detailed description of her assailant as a white male aged between 20 and 25, approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall, with an average build and brown hair. In order to gather evidence, a DNA sample was collected from the jogger's shirt and entered into the FBI CODIS database, which serves as a repository for DNA profiles. Following this failed assault, Austin embarked on a family vacation to the U.S. Virgin Islands, where there is no indication that he committed any crimes. Interestingly, there were no observable abnormal behaviors exhibited by Austin subsequent to the attack. In his distorted mindset, Austin concluded that he needed a smaller and more vulnerable victim. The neighbor who alerted the police about Austin also expressed concerns about his behavior. Hacking on this information, the police brought Austin in for questioning and obtained a DNA sample before releasing him. Amidst this chaotic situation, Mindy Sigg found herself faced with an incredibly difficult decision. She harbored suspicions that her son, Austin, may be somehow connected to Jessica's disappearance. The Sigg family resided near the Ridgeway home, and Austin had previously attended the same elementary school as Jessica. A few days later, on October 23, 2012, Mindy Sigg made an urgent call to the police, requesting their immediate presence. Clearly distressed and struggling to maintain her composure, she conveyed, "My son wants to confess to the murder of Jessica Ridgeway." Overwhelmed with emotions, Mindy was having difficulty breathing. She then handed the phone to Austin, who chillingly admitted, "I am responsible for the murder of Jessica Ridgway. I possess undeniable evidence, leaving no room for doubt. I am surrendering completely without any resistance." The police swiftly responded to the call, rushing to the residence and apprehending Austin. During the subsequent interview, Austin confessed to the murder of Jessica but denied any involvement in the assault. He claimed that he had gone hunting on that fateful day and had no prior knowledge or acquaintance with Jessica. However, he was well acquainted with the area as he had attended Witt Elementary School himself during his childhood. By deliberately selecting this location, it is likely that he was aware of secluded areas away from potential witnesses. On that fateful day, Austin swiftly seized Jessica while she was walking on the sidewalk, forcefully pulling her into his vehicle and driving away. He admitted that he had planned to murder her from the beginning, but assured her that she would be safe and reunited with her mother as long as she remained calm. Austin restrained her hands and feet using plastic ties, driving around for approximately 30 minutes before reaching his mother's house. In the garage, he subjected Jessica to horrifying torment, cutting off pieces of her hair while watching television. Jessica was so terrified that she involuntarily urinated. Subsequently, he forced her to change into his clothes due to her soaked attire. The details of Jessica's murder are extremely distressing. Austin initially attempted to strangle her with zip ties, but when unsuccessful, resorted to manual strangulation. Realizing that she was still alive, he drowned her in a bathtub filled with scalding water. The brutality continued as he dismembered her body in the bathroom, utilizing an electric saw, utility knife, and razor blades. Austin meticulously labeled certain body parts and placed them in bags, disposing of her remains in a small pool shed located in his backyard. The following day, he drove around in his Jeep to dispose of Jessica's belongings, strategically placing her backpack in Superior to mislead the police and discarding her jacket in a random trash can. Fearing detection by cadaver search dogs, Austin felt compelled to dispose of Jessica's torso separately. In a disturbing twist, he indulged in a fantasy by impersonating a medical examiner, removing her organs in his home and washing the body to eliminate any evidence. He claimed to have flushed the organs down the toilet. A search of the house uncovered the remaining body parts and cut hair from Jessica in the crawl space, which Austin had previously described to the police dispatcher. Austin acknowledged placing a small hand-carved wooden cross pendant on Jessica's body. However, during the autopsy, it was discovered that the cross was found inside her body, which was one of Austin's practices. Austin confessed to etching 3 designs on the cross before inserting it inside her. The police, in their search for public assistance, initially released a photo of the wooden cross without revealing its significance. Austin confirmed these details to the authorities. The wooden cross, measuring 1 inch, was discovered in Jessica's vaginal cavity, a deeply disturbing choice that violated her innocence and resulted in part of her body being discarded in a trash bay. When questioned about his previous attempt to assault a female jogger, Austin admitted that he would have done the same to her as he did to Jessica. His plan involved disposing of the jogger's body in the sulfur pits located in the Colorado mountains. Austin confessed that he had harbored a long-standing sexual fantasy, one that had intensified over time. He admitted to going out before Jessica's abduction and murder to search for young girls, but he never acted on his urges during those instances. Austin confessed to all the charges, resulting in a total of 17 counts, with 11 specifically related to the offenses against Jessica and the earlier attack on the female jogger. Due to his age, he was initially placed in a juvenile facility. However, Austin, who was a minor when he committed these crimes, was later charged as an adult and transferred to an adult prison in Jefferson County. Considering his age, he spent the first 52 days in jail in a specialized housing unit. During this period, he was isolated from the general prison population and accompanied by a deputy for security purposes. Austin faced a total of 19 charges, including first-degree murder after deliberation, 3 counts of felony murder, sexual assault on a child, second-degree kidnapping and robbery, as well as attempted murder, attempted kidnapping, and attempted sexual assault in relation to the park jogger. On December 10, 2012, The prosecution added counts 18 and 19 for sexual assault and an enhancement for a crime of violence. Surprisingly, Austin initially pleaded not guilty to the 15 charges. However, later in court, 2 of the original 17 charges were dropped as duplicative. It remains unclear whether this police strategy was intentional or part of a larger legal plan. Nevertheless, in October 2013, just before the trial began, Austin changed his plea to guilty. He made this decision to spare both his family and Jessica's family from the gruesome details of the crime. During the trial, psychologist Anna Salter testified during Austin's sentencing hearing. Although she did not formally examine Austin, she assessed him based on observed behaviors and details from the crime and confession tapes. Salter noted signs of a sadistic necrophilia with psychopathic traits, but concluded that he was not truly psychotic. She suggested that Austin only showed remorse when police were closing in, indicating that he may have been remorseful for getting caught rather than for his actions. Salter also highlighted Austin's mode of operation, which involved leaving home 50 minutes late to catch up with elementary school children heading to school. In court, Jessica Ridgway's family members wore purple, Jessica's favorite color, and shared photos of her growing up. Christine Ridgway, Jessica's grandmother, expressed a profound impact on the family, stating, "This monster took away from me the light of my life. It shattered the core of my family. I miss her with every breath." Christine Ridgway continued, mentioning the absence of hugs, kisses, and the feeling of Jessica's little toes digging into hers on the couch. Jessica's mom, Sarah Ridgway, chose not to give Austin the satisfaction of acknowledging the extent of the damage he had done to Jessica's family. Instead, she informed Austin that after leaving the courtroom, she would purposefully forget his name and focus solely on preserving Jessica's legacy. In the eyes of Jessica's family, she will forever be remembered as a 10-year-old. During the court proceedings, Chief Judge Stephen Munsinger read a letter written by Austin before his arrest. The letter expressed Austin's self-perception as a monster, acknowledging the evil nature of his actions. Throughout the trial, Austin maintained a stoic demeanor, only showing some emotion during the victim impact statement, which gave hope that he felt deeper remorse for Jessica. The letter and Austin's behavior painted a chilling picture of his self-awareness as a perpetrator of heinous acts. Despite pleading guilty, the defense made every effort to secure the most lenient sentencing for Austin. They explored various mitigating circumstances in his life, including a troubled upbringing and medical conditions that could potentially reduce his culpability. However, these factors did not fully explain the meticulous planning and execution of the crime. The defense argued that Austin's actions were driven by desire rather than impulsivity, challenging the notion that his disorders entirely dictated his behavior. Despite the defense's efforts, maintained his guilty plea, acknowledging the seriousness of his crimes. Due to a Supreme Court decision in 2005, the death penalty was deemed unconstitutional for individuals under 18, sparing Austin from capital punishment. On November 19, 2013, he was sentenced to life in prison with an additional 86 years. After completing a minimum of 40 years of his life sentence, the 86-year sentence would then begin. In 2014, Austin was transferred to a different prison outside of Colorado, and the specific location was not disclosed to the public. This transfer was made to ensure Austin's safety, and the details of his new prison were kept confidential. 1 year after Jessica's tragic death, a park was constructed near the site of her abduction and dedicated in her honor. It was named the Jessica Ridgway Memorial Park. The structures within the park were painted purple, representing Jessica's favorite color, and featured dragonflies to symbolize her free spirit. The memorial rock and bench were placed at the location where her remains were discovered, providing a serene space for reflection and remembrance. This thoughtful memorial stands as a lasting tribute to Jessica's memory, offering solace to those who visit and honoring the impact she had on the community. Jessica Ridgway's story serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing need for conversations about child safety. It highlights the importance of educating children about stranger danger, safe routes to school, and seeking help in emergencies. As for whether justice was served for Jessica Ridgway and whether the sentence Austin received is agreeable, it is a matter of personal opinion. May 24, 2001, 27-year-old Army Sergeant Roger Reister and his 4-year-old son Tristan came home to a dreadful nightmare. His 29-year-old wife, Army Captain Lynn Reister, had been ruthlessly murdered in their house in El Paso, Texas. Lynn, who was 6 months pregnant, had her throat cut open in a horrible crime. But right away, the police sensed it wasn't a random break-in. Nothing was stolen. Her purse, car keys, checkbook, everything was left untouched. This meant whoever did this had a reason to target Lynn specifically. Who could have killed a pregnant woman? Did Lynn have any past conflicts that could have motivated such violence? To understand the case, police officers began looking into Lynn Reister's personal life. Born as Lynn and Armstrong on April 4, 1971 in Norristown, Pennsylvania, Lynn grew up with her siblings in the military town of Pensacola, Florida. Eager to follow in her father's footsteps, Lynn joined the military and was even deployed overseas. Despite the challenges of her military career, she was an inspiring person who brought out the best in others. While being stationed in Germany, met fellow U.S. soldier Roger at the Army base bar. They bonded over their shared love of country music. At the time, Lynn was Roger's superior in the Army. They kept their relationship a secret because the Army rules prohibited soldiers of different ranks from having any romantic involvement unless married. Less than a year after meeting, they got married in Denmark in February of 1996. Soon after, they welcomed their son Tristan Noble Reister on June 11, 1996. Roger and Lynn cherished their roles as parents to Tristan, but their military careers often kept them apart. In March of 2000, when Tristan was just 3 years old, Lynn was deployed to Saudi Arabia as the officer in charge of the Army's air defense artillery. The separation was difficult for the couple, especially with a young child. Around 4 months after Lynn returned home from her deployment to Saudi Arabia, Roger approached her with a surprising request. He wanted his younger brother, Rodney Reister, to move in with them. 25-year-old Rodney had a history of nonviolent offenses and was about to complete his probation in Florida. Roger wanted his brother to stay close so he could get better and find a job. During this time, Lynn also found out that she was pregnant a second time. With one young child and another one on the way, Lynn desired a less hectic work life, so she requested a transfer to become a teacher in Minnesota. Tragically, her life was cut short before she could pursue her teaching job. The investigation into Lynn's death took a grim turn when the autopsy results arrived. The details were horrifying. Lynn had fought back fearlessly. Her hands bore witness to a desperate struggle with 6 defensive wounds. Her head had been struck 6 times and 6 stab wounds to her neck had nearly severed it. But there was one interesting detail. Police found a palm print on Lynn's arm. This potential clue was the only lead that could help police unmask the killer. When it came to suspects, naturally, investigators turned their attention first to Roger. They drilled down into his alibi for the day of the murder. Roger insisted he had left for work at 4:30 a.m. that morning, taking his son with him since Lynn had a doctor's appointment. He explained that he had been trying to contact Lynn all day to check in on her, but received no response. He also mentioned how his truck wouldn't start that morning, so he had called his brother Rodney, who was living with his girlfriend, to help fix the truck. Investigators weren't ready to rule Roger out completely, but there was no question his alibi seemed strong. This made them consider if someone else at the house might be involved, particularly Rodney, who had been at the Reister home the very morning when Lynn was murdered. Investigators learned that at the time of the murder, Rodney was living with his girlfriend as things hadn't gone well when he was living with Lynn and Roger. Tensions had flared between Rodney and Lynn ever since he moved in. She was unhappy with Rodney's behavior and laziness and felt that he put no effort at all in finding a job. Rodney had even used vulgar language toward Lynn. At last, when Roger asked Rodney to leave, he had moved out to live with his girlfriend. Suspicious about the situation, investigators questioned Rodney about his whereabouts and potential motives. Rodney cooperated with the police and answered all their questions. Rodney directed police to another potential suspect, a 19-year-old woman named April Lampier, who was said to have a jealous crush on Lynn's husband, Roger. This unexpected hint about a secret admirer complicated the case further. Was April's fondness for Roger merely a harmless crush? Or could she be the cunning psychopath who had eliminated Lynn to have Roger all to herself? Based on Rodney's insinuation, investigators suspected that April was a lovesick stalker who was obsessed with Roger. But then, the most shocking truth ripped through the case. April wasn't just infatuated with Roger. She was in fact Roger's mistress. When police interviewed April regarding Lynn's murder, April was shocked and denied any involvement. She stated that Roger had been hostile toward Lynn multiple times during their marriage and had even discussed the possibility of harming Lynn. She claimed Roger had talked about tampering with Lynn's car, but was concerned about their son's safety. When questioned again, Roger strongly denied the affair and any involvement in Lynn's murder. But April gave police a key piece of information. She mentioned that Roger had confided in her about finding someone else to kill Lynn. She directed police to a man named Patrick Mueller, or Mo, who was a close acquaintance of Roger. Mo was a tough guy with a military background, and when police sat down to interview him, more ugly details came spilling out. Mo revealed that Roger had offered him $10,000 to kill Lynn, with even more money coming from her life insurance policy. Apparently, Roger had been asking Mo to do this for months. Finally, Mo had agreed, but when the moment came, he got scared that a neighbor had seen him lurking outside the Reister house. He then left without going inside. With multiple suspects, including Roger, the police began looking for physical evidence, hoping to trace the killer with the palm print found on Lynn's arm. Who was this elusive killer? Could April have killed Lynn out of jealousy with a possible accomplice? Had Mo actually entered the house and attacked Lynn due to Roger's persuasion? Or was it Roger who had wanted to eliminate his wife all along? At last, investigators received a match for the palm print, and this evidence was going to flip the whole case around, leaving police questioning everything they believed so far. The palm print found on Lynn's arm belonged neither to April nor Mo, but to a shocking source. The bloody print belonged to Roger's own brother, Rodney Reister. Police immediately brought Rodney in for questioning, where he stuck to a carefully constructed alibi. He claimed to have visited Roger and Lynn's house that morning to help with Roger's truck, but had left right after Roger departed. However, the police had already spoken to Rodney's girlfriend, and her timeline didn't quite match his story. There was a suspicious gap of unaccounted time in Rodney's alibi. After hours of denial, under the pressure of evidence and the inconsistencies in his story, Rodney finally cracked and confessed. But his confession wasn't what anyone expected. Rodney wasn't the mastermind behind the murder. He was just a pawn in his brother's twisted plan. Rodney claimed that Roger was driven by a series of selfish motives. The solution in Roger's twisted mind was to eliminate the problem, Lynn. Rodney's chilling account painted Roger as the architect of the murder. He claimed that Roger had used the pretense of fixing the truck to lure him inside the house, showed him where the murder weapon was hidden, and even provided clean clothes for a quick change after the act. The plan was to silence Lynn quickly and prevent her screams by slitting her throat. Rodney recounted the chilling goodbye that Roger had voiced while leaving the house, a thank you for what Rodney was about to do. Rodney claimed that he was initially hesitant upon entering the room, but Lynn had seen him holding the knife and she reacted immediately. What ensued was a struggle with Lynn, pleading for her life against the accusations Roger had supposedly fabricated. Ultimately, Rodney had overpowered her and committed the heinous act. But another complication arose when Rodney later retracted his confession, alleging it was coerced by police who threatened him with harsher charges. But despite his shifting story, the police continued to pursue leads based on Rodney's claims. Shockingly, they found 6 people who confirmed Roger's rage at Lynn. 2 of these individuals even alleged that Roger had previously approached them to assist in the murder. With these additional pieces of evidence, the case against Roger began to solidify. But the question remained, was Rodney a reluctant accomplice or a cunning manipulator trying to shift the blame to his brother? The investigation was far from over. As police dug deeper into Roger's background, what emerged was a complex, unsettling picture. Roger was not the faithful husband he pretended to be. While Lynn faced deployments, including a difficult stint in Saudi Arabia in 1996, Roger indulged in a party lifestyle back home. He threw wild gatherings at the home where he invited unknown people and even teenagers, all while his son Tristan was present at the house. Lynn felt helpless since she was far away and could only express her frustration through messages on their answering machine. She pleaded with Roger to stop the partying, communicate more, and help out financially. Lynn tried hard to maintain their relationship for Tristan's sake. She and Roger even went on dates and tried to start fresh. Then came the devastating discovery of Roger's affair with April, which had begun in August 2000 while Lynn was still in Saudi Arabia. Even after Lynn's return, the secret affair continued. Roger would spend time at April's place and even invite her to their own home when Lynn was at work. While April played a part in the destruction of their relationship, Roger was far from innocent. He actively betrayed Lynn's trust while she was deployed overseas and created the emotional distance that allowed the affair to take root. Even after being caught, he continued to lie and manipulate her. Lynn, on the other hand, addressed the issues head-on through counseling and tried to rebuild a loving relationship. But in the end, her efforts were tragically in vain. The case against Roger morphed into a suffocating web of suspicion with each new piece of evidence. Police spoke to some of Roger's old friends that he had partied with while Lynn was away. One such friend, Sarah Woods, testified at Roger's trial. Back in May 2001, at a nightclub, Roger had confided a shocking plan to Sarah. He wanted to hire someone to kill Lynn. Another friend, Brian Broxterman, shared a similar story. The day before Lynn was killed, Roger had asked him if he knew anyone who would kill someone for money. Brian had been planning to report it, but before he could, the police arrived with the tragic news of Lynn's murder. Despite the mounting evidence, Roger denied everything. He claimed that he loved Lynn and their son and that he had been working on their relationship and planning a happy future with their second child to complete the family. But the evidence was no match for his protests. On May 29, 2001, both Roger and his brother Rodney were arrested by police. Rodney faced a possible death penalty with a high bond, while Roger's bond was lower. Even with the arrests, some people were in disbelief. A friend of Lynn's named Bridget said Lynn had never mentioned any problems with Roger, and the police confirmed there were no past reports of domestic violence. It seemed like there wasn't much evidence against Roger other than the disturbing things he'd said to his friends. The investigation revealed a dark side to Roger's story. At just 27 years old, he was charged not only with Lynn's murder but also for soliciting to murder. Roger's younger brother Rodney went on trial first. He faced the death penalty for murder, but during the trial, the judge heard arguments that Rodney had acted out of loyalty to his brother, not for money. In the end, Rodney wasn't sentenced to death, but he was found guilty of murder and given a life sentence in prison. Roger's trial came next. At first, he faced murder charges too, but because his brother Rodney wouldn't testify against him, those charges were dropped. Instead, Roger faced charges of trying to hire someone to kill Lynn. Roger's friends, Patrick Mo Mueller and Brian Broxterman, testified that Roger had talked to them about killing Lynn. But Roger kept insisting he was innocent and instead blamed Rodney for Lynn's murder. On September 14, 2001, the jury found Roger guilty. He was sentenced to 4 concurrent life terms with parole eligibility only in 2031, when Roger would be 58 years old. But to this day, Roger continues to maintain his innocence even while behind bars. At Lynn Reister's memorial service held on the military base, many soldiers paid their respects. Lynn was laid to rest in her army uniform with an ascot scarf carefully placed to hide the neck wounds for the open casket. A tiny baby blanket was tucked in beside her, a heartbreaking symbol of the child she would never hold. Her son Tristan went on to live with his aunt. The story of Lynn Reister is undeniably tragic, filled with unexpected twists and turns. The revelation that her own husband may have been the mastermind behind her murder, manipulating his own brother to carry out the unthinkable, is truly shocking. The man you just saw on the screen is 25-year-old Bryce Rhodes, displaying despicable behavior and showing no remorse or guilt for his actions. He stands accused of the murder of brothers 14-year-old Larry Ordway and 16-year-old Maurice Gordon, whose bodies were discovered following a disturbing 911 call which tipped off the authorities. When their mother, Elizabeth Rand, received the devastating news, her world crumbled into pieces. But what made the pain even worse was the horrifying way her sons were killed. They were terribly stabbed multiple times in the chest before their bodies were set on fire. It was so gruesome that the police had to prevent Elizabeth from seeing her sons for the last time. But why would anyone do such a horrific thing? According to Bryce, the boys knew a secret of his that could destroy his life. What could that secret be? And why would it lead to such a gruesome end for two young lives? And what drove Bryce to behave so despicably in front of law enforcement? On May 21, 2016, a 22-year-old girl was riding her bike past an old abandoned building on the 4000 block of River Park Drive in the Shawnee neighborhood of West Louisville. But that day was different as something strange caught her eye. The building, which had looked fine the day before, was now all burnt and destroyed. She felt curious about what had exactly happened there and decided to investigate further. Amidst the mess of the burned building, she spotted something strange, a shape that seemed out of place. As she went closer, her heart pounded with fear as she discovered it was a dead body. But the surprises didn't end there. Not far away, she had found another body and both of them were badly burned. Feeling extremely scared, she quickly called the police for help. Soon enough, the scene was swarming with police officers trying to figure out what mysterious events unfolded there last night. The crime scene was incredibly gruesome, so much so that the police called it the worst they'd ever seen. It was so disturbing that even one of the officers couldn't help but shake his head in disbelief and felt really emotional as he covered the two dead bodies with a white cloth. The bodies were rushed to the hospital for an autopsy by pathologists. Meanwhile, the rest of the officers stayed behind at the scene, carefully searching for any more clues that could help them in the investigation. After the autopsies, it was revealed that the cause of death wasn't the fire, but something even more sinister. According to a document released from the coroner's office, both boys had suffered severe head injuries from blunt force trauma, as well as stab wounds to their chests. What's even more chilling is that they had already died hours before their bodies were set on fire and left at the scene. Now, to begin their murder investigation and gather clues, the police needed to figure out who the boys were and why someone would harm them in such a terrible manner. Despite the bodies being badly burned, the police had a stroke of luck as they managed to create sketches of the boys. These sketches were shared with the public with a plea for anyone who recognized them to come forward and help identify them. But they didn't stop at just sketches. They delved into their records to find any missing persons reports that had been filed some days before and matched the descriptions of the victims. But sadly, they hit a dead end. Days passed, and even though Monday came and went, no one stepped forward to identify the boys. The following day, on May 23, 2016, a worried woman named Elizabeth Wren rushed to the police station. She was visibly anxious as she told the officers the sketches they had released were of her sons, 14-year-old Larry Ordway and 16-year-old Maurice Gordon. Elizabeth was shocked when the officers delivered the heartbreaking news that her sons' bodies had been found completely burned. The police told her that they were suspecting foul play and believed it wasn't just an accident, but rather a carefully planned murder. Elizabeth desperately wanted to see her sons one last time, but the officers had to gently refuse her request. The bodies were in such a horrible state that it wouldn't have been appropriate for a mother to witness. Despite feeling utterly helpless, Elizabeth gathered her strength and shared a crucial piece of information with the police. Elizabeth recounted to the police how on the evening of May 21, 2016, her sons had informed her that they were going out with some friends whom she had never liked. Despite her attempts to prevent her sons from hanging out with these friends in the past, they still went ahead. That night, they headed to a party with three individuals: 17-year-old Jackery Taylor, 15-year-old Anwan Carter, and 25-year-old Bryce Rhodes. Elizabeth expressed her concern about Bryce, who had a troubling criminal history involving various serious offenses, like domestic violence, physical offenses, kidnapping, and even abusing individuals. The boys assured Elizabeth they'd return soon, and even though days had passed without any sign of them, she didn't worry much. They had a habit of partying and sometimes not coming home for days, so she thought it was just another one of those times. However, Little did she know, this time would bring devastating news that would change her life forever. The police wasted no time in tracking down the entire group. They quickly found Anjuan Carter and brought him in for questioning. Meanwhile, they continued their search for Bryce, and by the next day, Tuesday, May 24, 2016, they had located him as well. Another member of the group, Jackery Taylor, was also apprehended on the same day, all within a short span of time. Bryce and Jackery spent hours in police custody as each were speaking separately with detectives about Larry and Maurice. The detectives tried to make Jackery nervous by showing him crime scene photos of the two brothers, hoping to coax information about the murders. However, all Jackery said was that he was friends with the brothers but had nothing to do with their deaths. On the other hand, Bryce insisted to police that he had no idea where the brothers were and eventually requested a lawyer. When Jackery and Bryce didn't provide any useful information, the police decided to change their approach. During separate interviews with Anwin, they noticed a difference in his demeanor. That's when Anwin finally opened up about what exactly happened on the evening of May 21st. He explained that Bryce had called him and Jackery to his apartment that evening. There Bryce confided in them and expressed his suspicion that Larry and Maurice might tell the police about something they had seen on May 4th, 2016, which was Bryce's biggest secret. Bryce managed to persuade Jackery and Anwin to assist him with a plan that involved something terrible, killing the brothers. On the night of May 21st, Jackery went to their house and convinced the brothers to come out by telling them that Bryce was going to take them to a party. Larry and Maurice were a bit unsure at first, but eventually they agreed to go along. As they had left the house, they assured their mother Elizabeth that they would be back later that night. The group had driven to Bryce's house, which he shared with his mother, who happened to be out of town that weekend. As the boys settled in, they began hanging out and having a good time, just like any other party. But Larry and Maurice had no idea that there was something sinister brewing behind the scenes. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an argument broke out among the group and ruined the fun atmosphere of the party. Anjuan told the police that Jackery accused the brothers that they had stolen money from Bryce. When Jackery confronted Maurice about the theft, he became furious. At that moment, Maurice felt threatened and could sense the danger, so he grabbed a knife to save him and his brother, which escalated the whole situation. Anwin stated that when Maurice pulled out the knife, Bryce quickly stepped in and took it away. Then they both managed to overpower the brothers and tied them up with belts. They separated Larry from Maurice so that both brothers wouldn't be able to fight back, and left him in the bathroom, while Bryce brought Maurice to his knees in the living room. Maurice pleaded for their lives, but Bryce demanded that he beg for forgiveness. It was a tense moment as Jackery and Anwin watched Maurice tearfully beg for forgiveness, hoping to save himself and his brother from whatever was about to happen next. Bryce's cruelty knew no bounds. After laying a blanket on the floor under Maurice, he had covered his head with stockings and shoved a rag into his mouth. Then, in a shocking act of violence, Bryce began mercilessly beating Maurice and stabbing him over and over again in the chest. The other teens watching were terrified and shaken by the gruesome and horrific scene unfolding before them. Bryce, with his menacing demeanor, threatened the boys who were witnessing the horror and pressured Anjuan into stabbing once in the chest. Fearing Bryce's wrath, Anjuan reluctantly obeyed his command and stabbed Maurice. Anjuan continued his chilling account and revealed that once Maurice was dead, Bryce forcefully brought Larry out of the bathroom to the living room, where his brother's blood was covering the floor. It was a heartbreaking moment for Larry as he realized his brother was now dead. Maurice's lifeless body was moved aside as Bryce turned his attention to Larry. Anjuan vividly remembered Larry's painful voice when he pleaded with Bryce to spare him, but it was all in vain. Larry was subjected to the same horrific treatment as his brother. Anjuan still heard Larry's desperate pleas before Bryce had stabbed him a shocking 20 times in the chest. Once again, Bryce threatened Jackery and forced him to stab Larry once. With both Maurice and Larry now dead, Bryce loaded their bodies into the car and called another friend to help dispose of them. As Bryce and his friend drove off with the brothers' lifeless bodies in the back seat, Anjuan and Jackery were left behind at the apartment as Bryce instructed them to clean up the gruesome scene. Anwin continued his confession by revealing that Bryce drove their lifeless bodies to an abandoned lot and set them on fire. As the flames engulfed Maurice and Larry, their bodies burned that fateful night. However, by some stroke of luck, their bodies hadn't turned to ashes. After Anwin's interrogation, the police finally uncovered the horrifying truth about how Larry and Maurice met their tragic end. However, there were still lingering questions in their minds. What was the brothers' connection to Bryce? And what was the secret that led to such a dreadful fate for the sibling? Larry and Maurice were just regular teenagers who enjoyed life, and even though they were stepbrothers, they shared a strong bond. But things took a turn when they met Bryce in 2015, and his cool personality caught their attention right away. Bryce was a rapper, and he had a bunch of music videos online that made him seem super successful and rich. Larry and Maurice were impressed by his lifestyle and charisma, and soon found themselves drawn into his world. When they all became close, Bryce introduced them to one of his friends, 17-year-old Jackery Taylor. As the three boys hung out with Bryce more and more, they met a fourth teenager, 14-year-old Anwan Carter, who also joined their group in 2015. They all used to spend a lot of time with Bryce as he would drive them around, buy them clothes and food, and even give them money to spend as they pleased. In an interview with the police, Jackery revealed that Bryce used to promise them that they would become famous if they followed in his footsteps. As time went on, the boys seemed to embrace Bryce's gangster lifestyle more and more. They even appeared in some of his music videos, giving off the impression that they were adopting his mentality. Elizabeth noted a change in their behavior during this period. Their social media accounts started to fill up with pictures of them posing with fake weapons, showing off stacks of cash and smoking cigars, along with images of women. They also began attending parties regularly and would sometimes stay out for days. On May 4, 2016, they were returning from one such party late at night. Around 12:30 a.m. Maurice was driving Bryce's car with Jackery in the passenger seat and Bryce and Larry in the back, while Anjuan was following behind them in a truck. Suddenly, Bryce made Maurice slam on the brakes of his car when he spotted a man walking on the sidewalk of the 800 block of South 41st Street in Louisville, Kentucky. As he strained to remember where he knew him from, it soon clicked that he was Christopher Jones, the 40-year-old man that local gangs were after. But Bryce made a serious mistake. He wrongly identified Christopher, thinking he was someone else trying to collect the reward placed on his head. It was such a mistake that had changed everything in an instant. In a moment of panic, Bryce quickly pulled out his gun and shot Christopher in the chest from the car window. As Christopher fell down, all the teens were stunned by witnessing a murderer in front of their eyes. Without even stopping to think, they drove away from there as fast as they could, feeling scared and full of adrenaline. After the shooting, Christopher was rushed to emergency surgery, but sadly, he didn't make it and died during the operation. Bryce had driven the boys home and warned them not to breathe a word about what happened that night. But over the next 2 weeks, Larry and Maurice couldn't shake off the horror of what they'd seen. They started avoiding Bryce more and more as they felt uneasy about being around him. Meanwhile, Bryce was feeling anxious too. He worried that the brothers might spill the beans about the shooting to everyone and he would be in serious trouble. So he made a decision to end their lives on the evening of May 21st, 2016. In a short period, Bryce made a grave decision to take the lives of 3 people, all to protect himself. But now the consequences of his actions are closing in on him. Following the interrogations, both Jackery and Anwin admitted guilt to 3 counts of aiding and murder and tampering with evidence. Because they were under 18 years old, they were sentenced to serve 10 years in juvenile detention centers, with the remainder to be served in adult prisons once they turned 18. As part of their agreements, they were also required to testify against Bryce during his trial. Ever since Bryce was arrested, he made a mess of the court hearings. The victims' families thought he did it on purpose. They believed he was trying to cause chaos because he knew the prosecution wanted the death penalty. He thought if he made enough trouble and delayed the process, they might not give him the death penalty. At first, Bryce did something shocking. He spit on his court-appointed attorney because he found out the attorney was friends with the victim's grandfather. This caused a big problem and the attorney had to leave the case due to a conflict of interest. Later, there was even a fight between Bryce and the attorney, and you can see it all in the court footage. Bryce even made a threatening statement, "I'll see you when I get out." Because of this threat, in future courtroom appearances, Bryce was restrained to his chair and made to wear a spit mask. But even with these measures, his behavior didn't improve. In one hearing, he even threatened the judge and her family. Bryce's antics in the courtroom didn't stop there. Many times, he refused to let his attorney speak for him and claimed that he didn't trust them. He even went through 3 different state-appointed attorneys because of this. It was like he was determined to do things his own way, no matter what anyone else had said. After this courtroom appearance in 2017, Bryce also tried to escape from prison by digging a hole in his cell. However, officers found the hole and also uncovered a threatening note he sent to Jackery. The note read, "Rats get exposed. Show me that you're not a rat." This showed Bryce's determination to manipulate even from behind bars. In another shocking incident captured on court video, Bryce displayed shameless behavior as he was seen in the video blowing kisses at the mother of the victims. It was a disturbing display of his lack of remorse or guilt for his action. The trial kept getting postponed over and over again, and Elizabeth was becoming increasingly frustrated. Not only with the delays, but also with Bryce's attitude in the courtroom. During one hearing, her emotions overwhelmed her, and she had to be removed from the courtroom. Later, when talking to journalists, she revealed that despite trying to find forgiveness through her faith, she couldn't shake the pain of losing her 2 boys to this monster. She described Bryce as sick and a demon, which highlighted the depth of her anguish and anger towards him. After 6 long years of Bryce's senseless behavior and intense courtroom drama, justice was finally served in 2022. Bryce Rhodes was convicted of stabbing and burning the bodies of teenage brothers, 14-year-old Larry Ordway and 16-year-old Maurice Gordon. This gruesome act came after they reportedly witnessed him shoot and kill 40-year-old Christopher Jones in 2016. Along with the 3 murder charges, the jury also found Bryce guilty of tampering with physical evidence and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. For the murders, the jury recommended a life sentence without parole. Additionally, they suggested 5 years for tampering with evidence and 1 year for each count of abuse of a corpse. While he wasn't eligible for the death penalty, Bryce's sentences will run concurrently, which means he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars unless his defense wins an appeal. After the verdict, the teen brother's grandmother, Deborah Wren, was emotional while sharing her memories. During the trial, the jury had to think about Bryce Rhodes' mental state when deciding what punishment he should face. The defense brought in psychologists who said Rhodes had an intellectual disability. They also mentioned he had ADHD and bipolar disorder, but they believed he hadn't received the support or education he needed to deal with these challenges. Despite these arguments, the jury decided to support the prosecution and the victim. On the afternoon of June 25, 2015, a woman walking her dog along the shoreline of Deer Island near Boston, Massachusetts stumbled upon a plastic bag. She dismissed it as discarded trash, but her dog's persistent interest led her to a horrific discovery: the lifeless body of a child. Shocked and frightened, she immediately reported it to the authorities. Despite the authorities' best efforts, the baby doe's identity remained elusive, due to the severe stage of decomposition. However, it took 3 months to identify the child. Now, who in their right minds would end up doing such a crime? The investigation into the child's death began immediately after her body was found on Deer Island. Despite the severe decomposition, authorities worked tirelessly to identify the child. She was discovered wearing only a pair of white leggings with a black polka dot pattern, along with a zebra print blanket inside the bag. Initial uncertainty led to unsuccessful attempts when cadaver dogs were used to locate any additional bodies or remains. Decomposition of the body had already begun, making visual identification impossible, and long exposure to water prevented fingerprint collection. Investigators couldn't determine the child's race or ethnicity. It was unclear how her remains ended up at the location. There were doubts whether the body had been placed on the beach or drifted in the water from another location, potentially as far away as Canada. Authorities believe that the victim had been placed at the scene, rather than washing ashore from another location, as the body was not sufficiently decomposed. Following the discovery of the child's body, an autopsy was conducted on July 3, 2015, but it did not conclude what had caused her death. While authorities suspected foul play, no signs of obvious injury were found on the remains. Subsequent tests were conducted to detect any toxins, drugs, or alcohol as a possible explanation for the death. The child was eventually determined to be of Hispanic ancestry. Her hair was described as brown, wavy, and 14 inches in length, suggesting it had been left untrimmed for a while. She was estimated to be between 3'1" and 3'6" tall and weighed around 30 pounds. No distinct birthmarks or scars were found on her body. Her clothing, estimated to be of size 4T, was identified as manufactured by the Serco Company, possibly sold at Target, while the blanket was suspected to be from Cannon Mills, potentially sold at Kmart, along with the discovery of an elastic hairband. Despite her unidentified status, she appeared to have been well cared for during her life, with no signs of malnutrition noted. To aid in her identification, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children digitally reconstructed the child's face after previous attempts to identify the body failed. The reconstruction was created using Adobe Photoshop, incorporating mortuary and stock photographs to estimate her appearance when alive. Flyers containing images of the child and her belongings were distributed in hopes of obtaining more information. The child's details were entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, NAMAS, on July 4, 2015, and details of her discovery and physical estimations were included. Over 200 missing persons were ruled out from the case, but no matches were achieved. Despite extensive efforts, no one came forward to claim responsibility for the crime or to identify the victim. Now, forensic testing played a crucial role in the investigation of Deer Island Baby Doe's case. DNA samples were obtained from the body's hair and tooth, but they did not match any profile stored in databases of known missing persons. Additional samples were sent to the University of North Texas for more specific profiling. Although this process was time-consuming, it was determined that she may have also spent time in any of the 6 New England states and possibly others. The hair and enamel test indicated that she could have traveled across the country. Television host John Walsh provided insights into the case during an interview, urging viewers with information to come forward. Despite numerous tips received by authorities, many leads did not yield significant results. A 24-hour hotline and text hotline were established for individuals to provide information anonymously, resulting in submissions from across the United States and beyond. After 3 long months of tireless search, on September 18, 2015, the child was identified as Bella Nevia Amoroso Bond. She was born to Joe Amoroso and Rochelle Bond on August 6, 2012. Bella was identified after a neighbor of Rochelle Bond reported a link between her and the baby doe. Laura Sprinsky, sister of Rochelle's neighbor Michael Sprinsky, was concerned about Bella's continued absence from the household. So she confronted Rochelle and her boyfriend, Michael McCarthy, who claimed Bella had been taken away by the Department of Children and Families. However, this was later disproved. Suspecting that baby doe was Bella, the neighbor's sister contacted authorities. On September 17, 2015, a search warrant was executed at Rochelle Bond's home in Dorchester, Massachusetts. Bella's biological father, Joe Amoroso, had never met her but had spoken to her on the phone. Amoroso expressed disbelief that Rochelle could have been involved and speculated that she may have been sedated with heroin by her boyfriend. However, Bella's paternal grandmother believed Rochelle was heavily involved in Bella's death and questioned the truthfulness of Rochelle. So to know more about what had happened, detectives had to go deep into Rochelle and Michael's past, even as far back as November 2011, when Bella was conceived. Her mother, Rochelle, was neck-deep in heroin addiction. She was heavily involved in the local drug scene, resorting to illegal ways to fund her addiction. Despite the hardships, Rochelle had a partner, Joe Amoroso, who was also struggling with addiction. Their relationship soured when Joe discovered Rochelle had been unfaithful. He disappeared before Bella's birth, never meeting his daughter. Rochelle, who had previously lost custody of her other children due to her addiction, was determined to keep Bella. On August 6, 2012, Bella was born at Boston Medical Center. Seeing her daughter for the first time strengthened Rochelle's resolve to be a responsible mother. But despite her efforts, reports of neglect surfaced. She secured an apartment in nearby Dorchester and attempted to provide a stable environment for Bella. Despite her love for Bella, Rochelle struggled with her addiction, and old patterns occasionally resurfaced. Reports of carelessness continued, reflecting Rochelle's ongoing battle with heroin addiction and its impact on her ability to care for Bella. As months passed, the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families contacted Rochelle in 2012 and 2013. Due to concerns about the household situation, feeling the strain of single parenthood, Rochelle stayed in contact with Joe over the phone. Even though he reconnected with the family, he never returned to see Bella in person. Meanwhile, Rochelle wanted a partner and began dating Michael McCarthy in January 2015. At first, everything seemed normal, but soon Michael's behavior started to turn erratic. Obsessed with supernatural topics, he lived with Rochelle and Bella, and their relationship quickly spiraled downwards as they both succumbed to drug addiction. Reports to the police about the abuses yielded no action, and the situation persisted. The reason no one noticed Bella's absence was because Rochelle had been lying to them. She falsely claimed that Bella had been taken away by the Department of Children and Families after a visit to their home, citing the situation as too challenging. Given the circumstances, people believed Rochelle's story without having any doubts. With all the suspicion and false assertions from Rochelle regarding the child's removal by the DCF, the investigators obtained a search warrant and questioned Rochelle and Michael. Rochelle eventually confessed to the horrifying events of the fateful night. According to her account, Michael had burst into a rage, repeatedly breaking into attacks, believing the child to be possessed. When Bella became unconscious, Rochelle attempted CPR, but Michael threatened her and disposed of the body at the harbor. This confirmed the suspicion of investigators who had long suspected foul play in Bella's case. However, Rochelle's involvement raised questions about her capability. Some discrepancies, such as listing Bella as alive on a benefits form, led to speculation about her motives and level of involvement. So, Michelle and Michael were arrested on September 18, 2015. Medical evidence suggested that Bella's death may have been caused by the severe abdominal trauma. Dr. Henry M. Nields, the chief medical examiner, proposed that this trauma could have led to asphyxiation or cardiac arrest. Despite these findings, Michael denied any knowledge of Bella's death upon his arrest. As the trials of Rochelle Bond and Michael McCarthy unfolded in June 2017, each presented their own version of events. Michael attempted to shift the blame onto Rochelle, portraying her as a neglectful and drug-addicted mother. Meanwhile, Rochelle maintained her innocence regarding the crime, but admitted to helping dispose of the body under duress from Michael. She also faced charges for welfare fraud, and she continued to claim benefits for Bella, even after the demise. During Rochelle's trial, the court leaned toward believing her story, but she still faced serious charges. The evidence against Michael seemed stronger, with cadaver dogs indicating the presence of a body in the McCarthy household, and bruises on the body consistent with Rochelle's account. However, there was no direct evidence linking Michael to Bella's death. Michael's defense argued that he was not even aware Bella was missing, as Rochelle had allegedly told him she was taken away by the state's child welfare agency. The trials revealed a complex web of deception, abuse, and addiction within Bella's family. Meanwhile, Michael Sprinsky's role as a key witness underscored the emotional toll involved in seeking justice for Bella. The aftermath of Bella Bond's tragic end saw Michael McCarthy convicted for second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison on June 28, 2017, with the possibility of parole in 20 years. Rochelle eventually pleaded guilty and received a much lighter sentence of probation. However, questions arose about the Department of Children and Families' handling of Bella's case, with investigations revealing serious errors and misconduct. Bella's biological father, Joe Amoroso, delivered a victim impact statement before McCarthy's sentencing, expressing profound grief over the loss of his daughter, despite never having met Bella. Joe emphasized the significance of her life and lamented being deprived of the opportunity to be a father to her. Apart from these, An investigation by the Office of the Child Advocate revealed serious errors within the child welfare system. The agency issued only a formal written warning to the worker responsible for the misconduct. Balabin's case sparked a significant level of national interest with engagement on Twitter and Facebook. Various individuals offered to cover the expenses for the funeral and burial, while a funeral home pledged resources for a proper burial with a headstone. Joe Amoroso revealed plans to bury Bella in Winthrop, Massachusetts, surrounded by family, opting for public funeral and wake services. However, Bella was finally laid to rest on November 28, 2015, at Winthrop Cemetery in a private ceremony. As both her parents eventually agreed not to make the ceremony public, she was buried under a headstone bearing her name and the date of her discovery. Images of Bella were later released on her mother's Facebook page. 47-year-old Lindsay Bebeck was a loving mother of two. She lived in Huncote, a village on the outskirts of Accrington, Lancashire in the United Kingdom. During a night out when she was in her early 20s, she met the man she would later marry, Tim Bebeck. He said that she was stunning and immediately caught his eye. After 3 years of dating, the pair were married. And less than 2 years later, they welcomed their first child, a son, Stephen, and their daughter Sarah followed 2 years later. Lindsay worked at a local primary school as a teaching assistant, using her passion for helping people by working with children with additional learning needs. She loved children and would do anything for her students, using her artistic talents to create sets and props for the school plays. Lindsay was also very athletic, so long country walks were a huge part of her life. After being married for 20 years, Lindsay and Tim began to drift apart, and after realizing they had different goals and dreams, the pair decided to separate and divorce. But the divorce was very amicable and the pair remained on good terms. If one needed the other, they would be there to help. Lindsay moved into a house on Burnley Road in Accrington and started a new relationship. Tim would also start seeing someone else too. August 12, 2019. Lindsay and her daughter Sarah went out for a day of shopping at the mall in Blackburn. Sarah had just finished her GCSEs and wanted to buy some new things for her college course. They did some shopping before going to an Asda supermarket, and after a while the pair said their goodbyes and Lindsay dropped her daughter off at around 3 p.m. In the evening, she was due to have food with Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend at 6 p.m. Lindsay said she would see them then and told Sarah she loved her. As the couple traveled over to Lindsay's, they were confused to find that she wasn't there and the door was locked. Sarah hadn't taken her key as she assumed her mother would be there to let her in. They knocked, but there was no response. They sat and waited, and as time ticked by with still no sign of her, they became increasingly concerned. Sarah tried to get in touch with her mother with calls and text messages, but her phone appeared to be off. The messages didn't deliver and there was no reply. She called her father and asked him to pick them up, explaining that Lindsay's car was still parked outside and her phone had been turned off. They ran through the various possibilities. Had she run into friends and become sidetracked? Had she lost track of time? But this was so unlike Lindsay, and Sarah said she would never just not turn up. Sarah sent a message to Lindsay's best friend Sharon, asking if she knew where she was. Sharon said that she hadn't heard from her either, and her messages also didn't deliver to Lindsay's phone. She then went back to her father's house, and they went back with a set of keys to let themselves inside. Nothing seemed out of place. After calling out into the house, there was no response, just silence. They knew they needed to contact the police, so just after midnight, Tim called them. He told the operator that this was not like her, and she had never done anything like this before. A police officer was dispatched. When it became clear that she definitely wasn't there, a major missing persons investigation was launched. As this was so out of character, Lindsay was classified as a high-risk missing person. Tim was questioned about his movements that day, but he was quickly accounted for and had a watertight alibi. They needed to piece together her last known movements. Lindsay had been captured on CCTV heading down Burnley Road. She had taken her phone and her keys with her. As she loved to stay active, she had decided to go for a walk in a local area called the Coppice, a place that she would often go to, made up of woodlands and footpaths. The authorities were concerned that maybe she had fallen and injured herself, leaving her unable to get help. Lancashire police utilized a helicopter and drone and worked alongside the fire and rescue service and the mountain rescue service too to try and find her. Hundreds of people from the local community came out to help. Missing persons posters were put up and a Facebook group garnered more than 10,000 members. People from all walks of life had joined in the search, from seasoned walkers to parents with pushchairs. Everybody was desperate to find her. A dog walker would soon make a discovery. A red garment was found hanging on a fence. Lindsay's jacket had a red lining to it. As the search efforts continued, there was still no sign of Lindsay Bebeck. And as the days continued to pass, hope was quickly fading that they would find her alive. In a press conference 4 days after her disappearance, Detective Chief Inspector Alan Davies said that significant searches had been carried out and asked for anyone who had been in the coppice at around 4:30 p.m. on the day Lindsay had last been seen to come forward. That evening, hundreds responded to a call on social media to take part in a search for Lindsay, with her friends saying the support from the community had moved them to tears. One of the co-organizers said, "The community spirit is just amazing and we will not stop until she is found." The searches were split into teams of 20, with a map of the area put up at the base. Each group would mark off what had been searched, and they would look through every inch of their assigned areas. Detective Inspector Tim McDermott said the police were overwhelmed by the support and dedication shown by members of the public. It had now been a week since Lindsay had gone missing. Teams were deployed to search the rivers and more people continued to come out and join the hunt. August 24th, 2019 police received a call. A man had been walking his dog in Accrington Cemetery when it went into a wooded area. He had called for his dog to come back to him, but the dog didn't respond. It was fixated by something on the ground it was sniffing. The dog walker said, "I walked further forward and stood on something soft and squishy. I immediately jumped back and grabbed my dog by the collar. I then smelt a horrible smell. It smelt rotten and there were flies around it. I could see plastic and what looked like a leg." 12 days after she had been reported missing, the search for Lindsay Bebeck came to an end. There in Accrington Cemetery, her body was found. Lindsay's naked body had been wrapped in plastic and put into a makeshift grave with dirt from around the cemetery put on top of her in an attempt to conceal it. When the knock came at the door late that night, Sarah said she knew instantly it was not the good news they were hoping for. Following the discovery, Detective Superintendent Andy Cribben of Lancashire Police gave a statement. As news of the discovery began to spread, flowers were left in tribute to Lindsay, as those who had spent so much time looking for her were now faced with the heartbreaking truth. One card said that even though they didn't know Lindsay, she had touched their heart. A vigil was also held in nearby Peel Park, where a minute's silence took place and a choir sang Amazing Grace. The local church was packed out as people headed there to light candles for her. Flowers were also laid outside her school. Lindsay's ex-husband Tim said he was broken by the news and devastated watching his children lose their mother in such horrendous circumstances. Home office pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter carried out the postmortem. Lindsay had died from severe neck injuries. Dr. Carter said in her 25-year career, she had never seen such extensive crushing damage to an entire larynx, saying it had the same severity as one would expect to see in an industrial accident. Due to the state of decomposition, she had to be identified using dental records and also as a result of the decomposition process. No evidence of sexual violence or assault could be found. There had also been an attempt to saw off one of her legs. The police were now in a race against time to catch her killer, and the local community was in fear that someone else would soon fall victim. The following day, August 25th, a crime scene investigation team descended on the cemetery to conduct their inquiries. They found a pair of gloves and a saw close to the grave, and tests on them came back positive for blood. Lindsay's shoes were found in a skip, wrapped in a blue plastic bag with the soles cut off. They were able to get a DNA profile and it belonged to a male. The gloves also had a male DNA profile on the inside, and Lindsay's DNA was on the outside. The rest of her clothes have never been recovered. The police needed to establish exactly how her body had come to be in the cemetery. Between her body and the plastic she had been wrapped in were bits of grass and a leaf. The police had a botanist come in to examine the foliage. They were able to determine that the grass in between her body and the plastic had not come from inside the cemetery, meaning she had been murdered elsewhere. The exact location of her murder has not been established, but it's believed it most likely happened in the coppice, just minutes after she left her home. One object would soon blow the case wide open. In the cemetery was a blue wheelie bin. Several people had seen the blue wheelie bin during the searches, with one person even reporting it to the police, but at that time she was still considered a missing person and there was no evidence to suggest that she had come to any harm. So the police said there was no evidence to link it to her disappearance, and it was left where it was, with nobody realizing its significance. Then, an officer reviewing the CCTV footage came across something that immediately stood out. A young male wearing a gray tracksuit was filmed pulling a blue wheelie bin along Burnley Road at 2:30 p.m. before he turned onto Whitewall Road and headed into the cemetery. It had been filmed on the 17th of August, 5 days after Lindsay had last been seen. The police were cautious about releasing the footage initially. They knew they needed to find this person and quickly, but if he wasn't involved, releasing the footage could put him at risk. They decided to spend the next 24 hours trying to find him through the police databases throughout the country, but they came back with nothing. As they were trying to find him, a witness came forward. A woman had been on the coppice at the same time as Lindsay. She had a very worrying story to tell. I looked to my left and saw a lone male figure on a path that runs parallel to the path that I'm on. There was a lot of foliage. I didn't have a clear view of him at that point. I decided whatever route he went, I would take another route. From the first time I saw him, I was wary of him. He looked out of place in the woods. He was in front of me. He was walking very slowly. I didn't want to be in front of him. I wanted to be able to see him at all times. I slowed down so I could be behind him. As she grew even more concerned, she picked up her pace and began to look around for something heavy that she could use to defend herself if needed. She told the police in her statement, "While I can't say what his original pace was at that point, what I can say for sure is that as I turned my head to glance at him, he pulled up short, almost startled when I turned to look. I didn't look back again, I just daren't. I never saw him again." She was filmed coming out of the coppice. The path that she had taken would be the same one Lindsay would take. She couldn't do a formal identification, but her description matched the person from the CCTV footage. On the 27th of August, the police decided to release the CCTV footage and issued an appeal for anyone who recognized him to come forward. The footage quickly made the national news. Then, Lindsay and Tim's son, Stephen, received a phone call from one of his friends. His friend said he recognized the male and they went to the same gym. Soon, the police would get the break they had been hoping for. After seeing the appeal for information, a mother and father brought their son to Greenbank Police Station the same day the footage was released to the public. Their son was just 16 years old. Rocky Marciano Price was subsequently taken into custody. He was the same person that Stephen's friend had mentioned. A ban on reporting his name and any details about him was initially put in place to protect his identity, but this would later be lifted. When his home was searched, the same plastic that had been used to wrap Lindsay's body was found and tracksuits from the CCTV footage were found too. His DNA was a match to the items in the cemetery containing the male DNA profile. But who exactly was this 16-year-old suspected murderer? Rocky Marciano Price lived on Windhill Road with his parents and 5 siblings. He had an IQ of 65 and learning difficulties, including autism and ADHD. He was a student at a school for those who were unable to remain in the mainstream school system, where his teachers described him as very quiet, pretty much nonverbal most of the time. He avoided conversation unless it was something he wanted to talk about, like the chickens on his family farm that he helped to care for. He often went to the gym and spent his free time watching films and playing video games. He was assessed in 2015 and a psychologist concluded that he had a limited understanding of his own emotions and his own emotional well-being, and appeared to have little insight into the connection between events and emotions. A report completed the following year described him as having no stranger awareness and needing supervision outside. The police were able to trace his movements that day. At around 2:30 p.m. on the day of Lindsay's death, he had headed into the coppice, and Lindsay did the same at around 4 o'clock. Within a couple of hours, had left the coppice and walked down Burnley Road. It appeared that his tracksuit top was partially unzipped, and his tracksuit bottom's cord was untied. He also appeared to have wet knees. Price had gone back to the body twice on the 12th of August. At 6:55 p.m., CCTV captured him carrying a black rucksack. He then left the coppice with the rucksack before returning with the wheelie bin. A witness saw him at 8:28 p.m. pulling a bin that sounded empty. He would then return to the grave a further 2 times. Throughout his 11 interviews over 3 days, his answer to everything was no comment, but later he had a prepared statement. It read in part as follows: "I am not involved in Lindsay Bebek's murder. However, I was approached by a white male who speaks English, who offered me a large sum of money to move the body. I have not met this man before. I have not met him since, nor have I had any contact with him. He has not paid me any money. He told me that he would leave the money for me near where the body had been at first, once everything was clear. I cannot describe the man other than to say he was white, male, spoke English. I could not see his face well as he was covering it with his hood. I am not sure of his height, build, or age." Detectives scoured the CCTV footage to try and find if there was any evidence of this white male being in the coppice, but they could find none. On the 31st of August, Price was charged with murder. Her devastated family said they were emotionally exhausted and completely and utterly numb. On Monday, the 2nd of September, appeared at Blackburn Magistrates Court before the case was sent to be heard at Preston Crown Court the next day. He pleaded guilty to moving and hiding her body, but he entered a plea of not guilty to the charge of murder. On the 20th of September, Lindsay Bebek's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church, with more than 200 in attendance. An obituary read, "Lindsay was the most amazing mom. She doted on her children and always gave her all to ensure that their life was fun and filled with laughter." The road was closed off as her coffin was taken into the church, and the community came out in their droves to say goodbye and to show support for her family and loved ones. Rocky Price's trial was set for the February 25, 2020, with Mrs. Justice Yip presiding. As the trial got underway, several problems caused difficulties. The trial didn't take place for 2 days in the second week, as the judge had other commitments that she had to attend to. Problems with the power and the heating forced the court to end early on Wednesday, and then they were sent home at lunchtime on Thursday when the prosecution rested their case. But just a few days later, there would be a shocking turn of events that nobody had been prepared for. The defense made an application to discharge the jury and have a retrial. This was before they had made their case. Meetings were held between the defense, the judge, and the prosecution. On the 9th of March, the court reconvened without the jury. The judge placed strict reporting restrictions on the matter, but the problems at hand would later come to light. That day, the court was told that 2 men, ages 22 and 23, and a 22-year-old woman, had been arrested for a separate offense of the false imprisonment of a young man. This was not related to Lindsay's case, and the parties involved were not connected to Rocky Price or the wider inquiry. A video found on the phone of one of those who had been detained purported to show a man discussing aspects of the Bebek case and saying he had been involved in the murder and the disposal of the body. David McLaughlin QC for the prosecution said that the video was neither consistent with the facts of the case nor with the defense put forward by the defendant, but added it was clearly something that had to be fully investigated to ensure the defendant could have a fair trial. Lancashire Constabulary examined the footage over the following 5 days, and 25 officers were part of the inquiry. Following this, they were satisfied that this apparent confession was false. David McLaughlin agreed that the extensive nature of the inquiries required proper consideration by the defense, and this could not be done in a realistic timescale for the first trial to continue. He added that in his 30-year career as a lawyer, he had only ever dealt with a situation like this once and referred to the matter as almost uncharted territory. On the 10th of March, the jury was officially discharged and the trial against him collapsed. Price was remanded in custody and a new trial date was set for June 15th. When COVID hit and lockdown orders were issued, the trial was pushed back again, this time to the 3rd of August. Finally, the new trial commenced. His story that he had been offered money by an anonymous man to move the body was dismissed by the prosecution as implausible fiction. The woman who had given the statement to the police saying that she had been followed by a male on the coppice was not able to formally identify Price in court, but the DNA could link him to Lindsay through various bits of evidence. His DNA was on her trainers and her DNA was on the outside of the gloves and his DNA was on the inside of them. Both of them could be linked to the wheelie bin. The state of decomposition suggested that she had been stored upside down in the wheelie bin before being taken to the cemetery. He sat slouched in the dock with his hands in his pockets, with Sarah saying he showed no respect for anybody in the court. As the trial continued, the horrifying details were laid bare. The brutal nature of her death and the injuries that she had sustained shocked the court, and coverage of the trial made national news. After the defense and prosecution had rested their cases, it was now time for the jury to deliberate. 12th of August 2020, 1 year to the day since Lindsay had been murdered. After just 3 hours of deliberations, the jury had reached their verdict. DSI Cribben described the atmosphere in court. It's an atmosphere like none I've ever experienced before at any murder trial. Rocky Marciano Price was unanimously found guilty of murder. Mrs. Justice Yip said the killing had been significantly premeditated. The murder of a stranger in broad daylight with no rational explanation is horrifying to all members of society. The random nature of the killing shows the defendant presents a very real risk to members of the public. I have no doubt he knew what he was doing and knew it was terribly wrong. The stalking of another woman also demonstrates this did not arise out of a sudden loss of control or heat of the moment. He persisted with his plan to target a lone woman. It shows he had the capacity to plan and reason. When deciding on her sentence, she decided she would take into account his lack of previous criminal convictions, what was referred to as his immaturity, and that he was likely to have challenges while in prison. Price was not in court for the sentencing and appeared via a video link. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. Due to his age, the minimum term was 12 years, but as there was an element of premeditation, he received 16. He showed no reaction as his sentence was handed down. Following his sentence, members of his family wore shirts saying, "Wrongly convicted, free this boy." The back of the shirt said, "Murder is still at large." His father said, "Our son is innocent. He has not got the mental capacity to hurt anyone. We are not going to stop fighting if it takes us all our lives to find this other man." In spite of the evidence, there are those that do not believe he is responsible. A group of around 30 marched in protest against his conviction, again arguing that the guilty verdict was wrong. A petition was created on change.org, arguing that he had been wrongfully convicted, and rumors were even spread that Tim was responsible. Tim said, "The police kept saying to me, just ignore them, Tim, and they'll go away. But they do chip away at you. It does hurt you. We've been through absolute hell regarding this. Then you've got to deal with these people who are pointing fingers. It's despicable. I just want people to understand there's still a family picking up the pieces and trying to rebuild." After Price was sentenced, DSI Cribben gave a statement outside court. Lindsay's devastated family said, "It has left a huge void in our lives that will never be filled. This callous act has destroyed our lives forever. Our family needs time to reflect and grieve for Lindsay and to try and rebuild our shattered lives." Lindsay Babek was a woman who touched the lives of many, from the students she worked with to the friends that she made. She devoted her life to helping young people who needed extra support and would always put others before herself. The way in which the community rallied together to try and find her was inspiring, but for those left in the wake of such an appalling crime, life will never be the same. Her legacy will continue to live on through the lives of her children and loved ones, who will ensure that she will never ever be forgotten. In January 2013, Brandon Mason Lawson, 26-year-old father from Texas, vanished into thin air after a late-night roadside call for help. What began as an ordinary night took a mysterious turn when his car was found abandoned. In a frantic 911 call, the voice of Brandon trembled with fear as he whispered about being chased and urgently needing help. Despite extensive searches and investigations, Brandon remained an insoluble puzzle and left his family and friends desperate for answers. Who was he running from and what really happened that night? Let's watch the video to explore the mystery. At the time of his disappearance, Brandon Lawson was an oil field worker from San Angelo, Texas. By all accounts, he was a loving father of 4 children and a dedicated partner to his girlfriend, Ladisa Lofton, with whom he had shared a decade-long relationship. As the mother of their 3 children and stepmother to the eldest daughter of Brandon, Ladisa was deeply concerned about the recent drug relapse of Brandon, which had led to his unexplained absence. Though their relationship was marked by typical ups and downs, they shared a bond built on years of shared experience and the trials of raising a family together. However, like many young people, Brandon had his struggles. He had a history of substance abuse, specifically with methamphetamines. However, he had reportedly been clean for about 6 months before the night he vanished. His family and friends knew him as a hardworking and resilient man who was attempting to turn his life around. Still, the grip of addiction had overwhelmed him in the past, and the pressure of balancing family life and his job in the demanding oil industry weighed heavily on him. On the night of August 8, 2013, an argument between Brandon and Ladisa set off the chain of events that would lead to his disappearance. The evening began like any other. Brandon arrived home in San Angelo after a long day of work. Between 10:45 and 11 p.m., a fierce argument broke out between Brandon Lawson and Ladisa Lofton. Initially, it was unclear what exactly triggered the argument, but later revealed by Ladisa that Brandon had not returned home the previous night, which caused her to become frustrated and suspicious. At around 11:30 p.m., after the argument worsened, Brandon decided to leave the house. He called his father that he was coming over to his house, which was in Crowley, Texas, and was approximately a 3-hour drive from San Angelo. At 11:54 p.m., he got into his silver Ford F-150 and drove off and left Ladisa behind. She wasn't overly concerned at the time and thought he would cool off and return once he had calmed down. Later, in an interview in 2018, Ladisa reflected on the fight and reclaimed that the fight was a contribution of several factors. Major contributing factors were the demanding work schedule of Brandon, which was exceeding 60 hours per week, and the recent birth of their youngest son had introduced new stressors between them. Ladisa expressed deep regret over the argument and acknowledged the emotional burden of her words. She confessed that for a long time she blamed herself. She was still haunted by the memory of their last confrontation and said, "I will never get those words back." At approximately 12:30 a.m. on August 9th, Brandon called his brother Kyle to inform him that he had run out of gas along Highway 277, which was near the small town of Bronte. It is a town consisting of a wide, rugged area of hills and desert. The land around it is tough and unforgiving with steep hills, rocky patches, and dry river beds. It is remote and isolated with only a few people living there. Cell phone service is limited and there aren't many services nearby. At night, it is pitching dark, so dark that only the stars break through the black sky. The silence is heavy and interrupted only by the wind. In a place like this, getting stuck can quickly become a serious problem. This is exactly what happened to Brandon Lawson on the night of August 9th, 2013. His truck ran out of gas along Highway 277 just outside of Bronte. Suddenly, he was alone in the middle of nowhere and exposed to the harsh environment. He has nothing to do except wait for his brother. Kyle recalled that during one of their calls, Brandon sounded out of control. He told Kyle that someone is chasing him, which obviously raised alarm bells. When Kyle pressed for more details, Brandon added that it was the Mexicans in the neighborhood who were after him. Again confused, Kyle asked if he was hallucinating due to drug use, but Brandon denied it. Kyle was concerned but unsure of what was going on. He, along with his wife, and their 4-year-old child quickly headed to the house of Ladisa to grab a fuel can so they could help Brandon. As they drove, Kyle kept trying to stay in touch with his brother. However, every time they spoke, Brandon didn't seem willing or able to hold a full conversation. Despite the best efforts of Kyle to communicate and get a clear picture of what Brandon was facing, their conversations were brief and disjointed and added another layer of mystery to an already confused situation. At 12:50 a.m., Brandon made a distressing call to 911, which has since become one of the most crucial and confusing pieces of evidence in the case. The 911 call was placed to a local nursing home in Robert Lee, Texas, due to routing errors. The voice of Brandon on the call was panicked and inconsistent. His words were difficult to understand, but certain phrases stand out. Clearly confused by the call, the dispatcher attempted to ask questions, but responses of Brandon were fragmented and unclear. He seemed to be in a state of panic and mentioned someone chasing him into the woods and requested immediate help. Despite the confusing nature of the call, it was obvious that Brandon was in distress and believed he was being pursued by someone. Here's a breakdown of the phone records leading up to Brandon's disappearance. At 12:51 a.m., Kyle left a voicemail after Brandon claimed he was being chased. Brandon then tried to call Ladessa, but couldn't reach her, as she had left her phone in her car after an argument. The urgency grew when the wife of Kyle also called Brandon, and then Kyle again called him, but none of them received answers. By 12:57 a.m., Brandon contacted his neighbor, but this yielded no clarity. Again at 1:04 a.m. a dispatcher from a nursing facility reached out to Brandon about his earlier 911 call. Then at 1:09 a.m. Brandon made 3 more calls to Kyle. One of these calls was when he told Kyle that he was running through a field and bleeding. Kyle later mentioned in an interview that he didn't think Brandon was seriously hurt. He assumed his brother had just tripped or had a minor accident. Then at 1:15 a.m., Brandon made his final 2 calls to Kyle. These would be the last outgoing calls from his phone before things went silent. This string of calls paints a chaotic picture of that night. Brandon was clearly distressed and was trying to reach out to multiple people, which included his brother, girlfriend, neighbor, and even 911. But due to poor cell reception, his frantic state, and possibly the dark and dangerous terrain, a meaningful communication was nearly impossible. The confusion between his calls and attempts of his family to locate him only added to the uncertainty surrounding his final moments. At around 1 a.m., a sheriff deputy of Coke County arrived at the location of Brandon's truck after they received a call from a truck driver who had reported the vehicle parked hazardously on the side of the road. By the time the deputy arrived, Kyle had also reached the scene, but there was no sign of Brandon. What made the situation even more bizarre was that during a phone call with Kyle around 1:18 a.m., Brandon claimed he could see both Kyle and the deputy from his hiding spot and said, "I can see you. I'm right here." Despite Brandon's claim, neither Kyle nor the deputy could spot him anywhere near the truck or the surrounding area. With an active warrant out for his arrest in Johnson County on a charge of drug possession with intent to deliver, Kyle assumed that Brandon was trying to hide from the police. He thought that Brandon didn't want to be caught, and especially with the deputy already at the scene. Neither Kyle nor the deputy knew at that moment that Brandon had made a 911 call earlier, so they didn't have all the pieces to understand what was really happening. Kyle later said that he didn't feel like he was in any danger. After talking with the deputy, Kyle decided to drive a little way up the road. He parked further down and hoped that Brandon might come out of hiding once the deputy left. Kyle waited there for 30 to 45 minutes, but when Brandon didn't show up, he assumed everything was fine and left for San Angelo. Later, at around 5 a.m. on August 9th, Kyle returned to the area where his truck had run out of gas. He called out for his brother, but once again, Brandon didn't appear. A couple of days later, on August 11th, a deputy reported that a small private search team had been gathered to look for Brandon. They started their search at around 8 a.m., but ended at around noon without finding anything substantial. The only clue they came across was a small area under a tree where it seemed like someone had sat down. This spot was close to the road and within sight of his truck. Despite the efforts of Kyle and the search team, there were no other signs of Brandon or where he might have gone, and left his family with more questions than answers. In the years since the disappearance of Brandon, numerous theories have emerged. Some are grounded in the facts of the case, while others originated from the strange nature of his final phone calls. One of the most widely discussed theories in the disappearance of Brandon Lawson is the idea that he may have fallen victim to foul play. His 911 call on the night of August 9th, 2013, where he mentioned being chased into the woods, has driven speculation that Brandon encountered someone or something dangerous that night. Some have even suggested that it could have been related to drug activity. Given that Brandon had used methamphetamines shortly before the incident, People wonder if he might have been involved in a dangerous situation and possibly a drug deal gone wrong or a confrontation with violent individuals while stranded on the highway. However, the lack of the evidence casts doubt on this theory. No signs of a struggle were found near his truck, and there were no reports of other vehicles in the area at the time. The scene around the truck was strangely undisturbed and left many to wonder that if foul play was involved, where did it happen and who was involved? Another theory that has gained some traction is that Brandon might have disappeared on purpose. His life was complicated at the time. Perhaps the combination of legal troubles, personal issues, and his rocky relationship with his girlfriend pushed him to take drastic measures. Some believe Brandon may have used the situation as an opportunity to escape his life and start fresh somewhere else. This theory is supported by a few pieces of circumstantial evidence. Brandon was the only person with the key to his pickup truck, which had been left partially over the white line on the road. The truck was towed around 8 a.m. on August 9, 2013, and law enforcement began to investigate shortly after. Deputy Neal, who was assigned to the case, checked several properties in the area for signs of activity. Many of these properties were only used seasonally, and the deputy wanted to see if Brandon might have sought water or shelter there. However, Neal found nothing that indicated Brandon had been there. On August 13th, LaDessa officially filed a missing person report, and Texas Ranger Nick Hanna, who was now leading the case, conducted a helicopter search. They flew over the area near US 277 and the Colorado River, but saw no signs of Brandon. The helicopter search revealed one interesting detail, that there was enough exposed ground that someone would likely have been spotted from the air if they were lying down or hiding. This led deputies to conclude that Brandon Lawson was no longer in Coke County. In his final report, the deputy stated that he didn't believe Brandon was lost or hiding in the area. His conclusion was based on a few factors. Kyle Lawson had told him that Brandon was likely hiding in the brush near his truck to avoid being discovered by the deputy. However, there were no signs of foul play in or around the truck. And most importantly, the text messages between Brandon and LaDessa on the night of his disappearance hinted at a heated argument. Neal believed that after he and Kyle left the scene, Brandon probably walked back to the road and got a ride from a passing motorist. Continued absence of Brandon over the years has only strengthened the belief that he intentionally disappeared. At the time of his disappearance, the area was experiencing a severe drought. During aerial searches, they were able to spot small objects from the air, such as corn sacks. If Brandon had been on the ground, they would have easily seen him. Furthermore, the river in the area was extremely low, with the deepest parts only reaching knee-high water. The conditions suggested that if Brandon had been in the area, he would have been spotted during their searches. The deputy also pointed to an active warrant of Brandon for possession with intent to deliver as a possible reason for his disappearance. He speculated that Brandon, wanting to avoid legal trouble, might have decided to run. This theory is further backed by the fact that Brandon had cashed in his $401,000 with Renegade Oil Services just before he went missing, and possibly as part of a plan to disappear. Several months after the disappearance of Kyle Lawson was asked to meet with Sheriff McCutcheon Ranger Hanna, who was an investigator from Johnson County, at the same place where a warrant of Brandon had been issued. They questioned Kyle about his involvement and asked if he had harmed his brother or helped him escape. Kyle eventually requested a polygraph test to clear his name. According to Kyle, although there were some inconsistencies due to coughing during the test, he passed the test regarding harming his brother. Another theory surrounding his death is the accidental death or the lost in the wilderness theory. US 277 is a dry and rugged area which is filled with thorny bushes, cacti, and dangerous animals like rattlesnakes and wild hogs. The extensive searches that have been carried out seem to reflect this belief. Each lead has ended in disappointment with no trace of him found. The last theory suggests that Brandon may have experienced a drug-induced hallucination or paranoia due to his recent use of methamphetamines. Methamphetamine can cause severe paranoia, confusion, and erratic behavior, particularly if someone has been awake for an extended period. It's possible that references of Brandon to people chasing him were the result of a hallucination brought on by the drugs, and that he fled into the wilderness in a disoriented state. Paranoia refers to an intense fear or distrust of others. and often accompanied by irrational thoughts or beliefs that someone or something is out to harm them. In the context of drug use, paranoia can manifest as a heightened sense of threat or danger, and even in the absence of real external threats. This theory could explain bizarre phone calls of Brandon, but it still doesn't answer the question of what happened to him after he ran from his truck. Did he succumb to the elements? Did he fall into a ravine or get stuck somewhere inaccessible? After Brandon Lawson disappeared, his family has been left in a painful situation, torn between hope and harsh reality. His father, Brad Lawson, battles with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he knows the chances of Brandon being alive are slim, but on the other, he is haunted by nightmares where Brandon is still alive, perhaps forced into slave labor by a cartel. Brad can't shake the idea that his son might still be out there somewhere, and the possibilities for foul play seem endless. Could someone have been following Brandon that night? Did he enter onto private property and meet a deadly encounter? Or was it a crime of opportunity with someone passing by seeing him vulnerable and taking advantage? For Lydessa Lofton, the uncertainty is unbearable. She fears that her children will grow up, get married, or even have kids of their own without ever knowing what happened to their father. The memory of that night weighs heavily on her, and especially the fight they had before he disappeared. Hurtful words were exchanged, and it is a guilt she struggles with every day. The last link they have to Brandon is the weird 911 call he made that night. For Lydessa and her children, it's a painful reminder of his final moments. His two older daughters listen to the recording on YouTube and trying to make sense of his words, but it only deepens the heartache. Brad is firm in his belief that his son didn't just run away. He argues that the warrant for arrest of Brandon wasn't enough to make him abandon his family. And Brandon had faced legal issues before and was always willing to face the consequences. In fact, he had plans for the future, including starting a new job that offered more money and benefits, which was supposed to begin the Monday after his disappearance. Adding to the confusion is the fact that none of Brandon's belongings like his wallet, keys, phone, or even his shoes have ever been found. His brother is lost by how someone could disappear so completely without leaving behind a single clue. This only strengthens the suspicion of the family that foul play was involved. Lydessa believes that someone out there knows what happened to Brandon, and she holds on to hope that this person will eventually come forward. There are unanswered questions that continue to haunt her, like who the trucker was that reported Brandon's pickup or the identity of the dispatcher who spoke to him that night. Lydessa believes that these people might hold critical pieces of the puzzle that could finally explain what happened. Despite telling herself that the disappearance of Brandon might have been an accident, Lydessa can't ignore the alarming tone of his 911 call. She doesn't want to believe that anyone would harm the man she loved so deeply. Friends and family of Brandon Lawson established a Facebook page titled Help Find Brandon Lawson, which has gathered significant attention and support since its beginning. As of 2024, the page brags over 29,000 followers and demonstrates widespread interest and concern for the unresolved disappearance of Brandon. This online platform serves as a critical hub for sharing updates, information, and appeals related to the case of Brandon. It provides a space where loved ones of Brandon can connect with supporters, share memories of Brandon, and assemble efforts to keep his story in the public eye. The page plays a pivotal role in the ongoing search for answers and encourages individuals with any information about the whereabouts of Brandon or the circumstances of his disappearance to come forward. Private investigator Paula Boudreau, hired by Lydessa, has also been working tirelessly to track down clues and often drawn leads from the large community following the Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page. In her searches, Boudreau used cadaver dogs and helicopters to scan the land, but she has also faced obstacles. Some landowners have refused to allow searches on their property. Before 2022, the search for Brandon Lawson hadn't produced any leads or significant progress. But in early 2022, a small search party made a breakthrough at the last known location of Brandon. They discovered a pile of his clothes, which led them to alert authorities. Soon after, human remains were found in the area. By October 2023, the Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page shared that preliminary DNA results and the clothing found indicated the remains were likely of Brandon's. Additional tests were underway to compare the genetic markers from the remains with DNA from father of Brandon. The Texas Ranger overseeing the case expressed cautious optimism about confirming the identity of the remains. As of October 2024, there have been no further updates on the identification. It's 11 years now since Brandon went missing, and his family is still searching for answers. Unfortunately, these remains have not yet been truly identified. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, there's little left to work with. Each time a sample is extracted and tested, a portion of the remains is destroyed. This makes it crucial to preserve as much as possible for future DNA testing. The remains have been sent to 2 laboratories in hopes of extracting enough DNA, but those attempts have so far been unsuccessful. In June 2023, the Texas Rangers were exploring other options for identifying the remains, though the family is unable to comment further on what those options are, or the current state of the investigation. The disappearance of Brandon Lawson remains a tragic and mysterious case, and now likely to be resolved with the discovery of his remains. Despite this closure, many questions about the events of that night remain unanswered. His family, while grateful for some resolution, may never have all the answers they seek. The story of Brandon underscores the uncertainty of life and the pain of not knowing the fate of a loved one. It emphasizes the need for ongoing improvements in search and rescue efforts, especially in remote areas like West Texas. While the full truth may remain vague, memories of Brandon Lawson will endure in the hearts of his loved ones and all who have followed his heartbreaking story. 76-year-old George Peacock and his wife, 73-year-old Catherine Peacock, lived in Danby, Vermont in 1989. Danby is a small rural community of fewer than 1,300 people set in the mountains. On September 17th of 1989, a neighbor of the Peacocks entered their home after not seeing them for a few days. He found George's body at the bottom of the first-floor stairway in a large pool of blood. It was clear that he was involved in a struggle. Catherine was found face down on the floor of one of the upstairs bedrooms. She appeared to have been overpowered, subdued, and stabbed repeatedly. George was known to have a regular schedule. He had a habit of picking up a copy of the Rutland Herald every day. He didn't retrieve his copy on September 14th of 1989 or any day after that. This was out of character for him, as he was described to police as meticulous about maintaining his appointments. September 14th was 3 days before George and Catherine's bodies were found. This gave investigators a better idea of when their lives were ended. Investigators focused their attention on Michael Anthony Louise. He was married to one of the Peacock's daughters and lived in central New York. On September 18th of 1989, one day after the bodies were discovered, Louise and his wife had their first interview with investigators. Instead of driving their car, they had chose to drive a rental car to Vermont. Louise told his wife he was worried their car would break down, even though he had just taken it on a long drive just days before. He told investigators that he had dropped his wife off at her job on the morning of September 14th at 8:30. Louise told police that he randomly thought of retrieving some wood planks they had stored at the Peacock's home. Louise ran a few errands in the Syracuse area before heading toward Vermont by way of the thruway around 9:30 a.m. Louise then apparently stopped a few times along the way before he reached Saratoga between 1:40 p.m. and 2:10 p.m. and rested there for a short while. He told police he realized he was too tired to go all the way to Vermont and decided to turn around. Back in the Syracuse area at 6:15 p.m., he picked up his paycheck from the rental car service at the Syracuse Hancock International Airport, where he worked. About a month after the Peacock's bodies were found, a detective was updating Louise's wife on the investigation and told her they would be obtaining tolls. The detective also mentioned that a tan car was seen in the area at the time of the crime, the same color as the Louise family car. The detective was referring to telephone tolls, but she assumed they were speaking about tolls collected on the thruway. Louise freaked out when he heard this. The next day, Louise left his home with a weapon and gave his wife a note that implied he considered taking his own life. In the letter, he said he was scared, he couldn't sleep or eat, and that law enforcement would not believe him. In an interview with police on September 30th of 1989, An investigator asked Louise if he had possibly blacked out, took the peacocks' lives, and couldn't remember. Louise replied, "Yes, I've thought about that," and did not elaborate. In an October 5, 1989 interview with police and his lawyer Ed Mencken, a well-known Syracuse defense lawyer, Louise once again addressed the possibility of blacking out and attacking the peacocks. Louise had a history of blacking out and once committed a violent crime. In 1966, Louise served time for assaulting a 4-year-old girl in Rhode Island. When he was interviewed by police, he claimed he blacked out. During the October 5th interview, he said that he thought a lot about whether it was possible he blacked out. But he was certain he did not go to Vermont and hurt them. Louise's wife had signed a consent form allowing police to search their Chevrolet Celebrity. Police informed her that she should not tell Louise the vehicle would be searched so he could not destroy any potential evidence. She brought the Chevrolet to be searched. Police gathered 17 pieces of evidence for the laboratory examination. One of the items in the driver's side front floor mat appeared to have a small reddish-brown stain. The Vermont State Police Crime Lab confirmed that the spot was a small deposit of blood. Unfortunately, the sample was too small for the technology at the time to create a DNA profile. In 1992, Louise's niece Patricia Gannon told investigators that Louise told her and his wife that he had gone all the way to Vermont but drew a blank about what had happened. In May of 2020, 2 detectives with the Vermont State Police began reviewing the cold case. The detectives resubmitted several pieces of physical evidence to the forensic lab in the hope that advancements in testing and technology could crack the case. One of the pieces of evidence they submitted was from the driver's side front floor mat from Louise's tan Chevrolet Celebrity. As the chemist was examining the floor mat, he noted that the blood had been removed and retesting of the area yielded no results. The chemist looked into the case files and discovered the stain was removed during a previous round of DNA testing in the year 2000. Luckily, a DNA extract from the sample was preserved in a foil pack in the permanent evidence freezer inside the Vermont lab. The chemist submitted the DNA extract for retesting on May 14th of 2020. On October 19th of the same year, investigators received reports from the forensic lab. The report revealed that the blood on the floor mat was a mixture of at least 2 individuals. The major DNA profile found in the sample was a match for George Peacock's DNA, according to the court documents. The other DNA in the mixture was determined to be unsuitable for interpretation. Over the next 2 years, detectives re-interviewed several people close to the investigation, including Louise's wife and his niece. After all the evidence, both circumstantial and physical, was complied, detectives submitted their probable cause affidavit and requested a warrant for Louise's arrest on October 11th of 2022. Michael Anthony Louise was arrested 2 days later in his home in Salina, New York, and charged with taking the lives of George and Catherine Peacock. He was held in the Onondaga County Justice Center and was arraigned in Syracuse. Then, on October 14th, he appeared in court with his new defense attorney, Charles Keller, for an extradition hearing. Was brought into court in a wheelchair. During the hearing, Louise consented to be extradited to Vermont. Investigators in Vermont have 2 weeks to carry out the extradition before Louise can argue to be released. Keller told the court that Louise was eager to be extradited as soon as possible so he could contest the allegations against him. Despite the excruciating detail in the court documents making their case, police don't address one major mystery. Why were the couple's lives taken? The hope is that Louise will confess and reveal why he did what he did. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.